Hi guys. Today I'm going to be telling you about finding and using academic journal articles in your writing. Your third essay in this class requires you to use secondary sources, and journal articles are the easiest secondary sources to find and the easiest to use because they're not entire books. You can access them online through our library website. So what are academic journals? Um, They're sort of like academic magazines. They're the places to find the latest research in an academic discipline. Every discipline has journals: English, psychology, the natural sciences, medicine. They exist for every academic discipline. When you hear the word journal, you might think of a private place to write down your thoughts and feelings, but don't let the name fool you. Academic journals are nothing like that. An academic journal is sort of like an academic magazine that can be published yearly, quarterly, and so on. One issue of it will have a number of articles and also book reviews on important books in the discipline that have just been published and other important information in the discipline. You can ignore most of what is in a journal besides the academic journal articles. The book reviews probably will not be useful to you. Um, Experts in an academic field contribute to the knowledge in that field and further their careers by doing research and then publishing that research. And the easiest and quickest way for them to do that is to write it up and submit it to a journal in the form of an article. And then after they do that, the board of that journal reads the submissions and then determines whether the research that they have submitted meets the standards in that field, whether it's important enough to publish. This is why journals are said to be peer-reviewed, because the research in them is vetted by experts in the discipline. So, how are journal articles used in academic writing? Well, people working in a discipline read and use each other's research, so the articles on a particular topic found in academic journals can be thought of as sort of an ongoing conversation that experts in a discipline are having from all over the world over a span of years. And the conversation is constantly unfolding. By reading the research in academic journals and using it in your own writing, you're also participating in that conversation and in the field. Experts cite each other's research using academic systems of documentation that are discipline specific. So what I mean by that is within English departments, we use MLA citation. Unfortunately, English departments are pretty much the only academic discipline that uses MLA citation, or maybe that's fortunate if you hate MLA citation, which a lot of us do. There's also APA citation, Chicago citation, CSC citation. There are many different systems of documentation. In this class, we're using MLA citation. That stands for Modern Language Association. When should you use journal articles in your writing? I mean, the simple answer to that is when you're asked to, but a better answer might be when you are writing a research paper in an academic setting, you should use journal articles. That academic setting probably will be a class. So when you get to, for instance, Psychology 348 or whatever at the University of Washington, or a university you're transferring to after you're at Grays Harbor College, you'll be expected to know how to find and use journal articles in your writing. And you'll be expected to know how to research a topic, how to use that research appropriately in your writing, and how to cite that research. And so when you're given an assignment that asks you to use secondary sources or to research a topic, frequently that means that you're supposed to use journal articles. In this class, as I mentioned earlier, you'll be required to use a number of journal articles for your third paper, which is why we're covering this. So how can you find these journal articles? The first thing to do is to begin with a research question. So think about what it is you want to find. What piece of literature in this class are you writing about? What questions do you have about that piece of literature? Are they historical in nature? Are they biographical? What kind of a question are you wanting to investigate with your research? After you've formulated a good specific research question that articulates what it is you want to find, and that will depend on the school of criticism or the critical perspective you choose to write from. Don't use Google to do this kind of research, and the reason for that is if you use Google, you'll probably find some journal articles, but you won't be able to actually read them because there will be, I believe it's called a paywall in your way. Journal articles are not free for the general public. Academic journals require subscriptions, and so unless you want to go out and subscribe to every journal you want to read one article from, which would be quite expensive and also unnecessary, you wouldn't want to use Google because Google will just pull up the article's title and maybe an abstract or short description of it, but you won't be able to actually access the article itself. But don't fear, GHC Library, the GHC Library has access for you to all kinds of databases which allow you to search through academic journals, access the articles, print them out, read them in full, whatever you want to do with them. And this is part of your tuition and fees. Your tuition and fees pay for this. So as a student here, you have access to these journal articles and to this research. As a general sort of citizen, you wouldn't have access to this stuff. So when it comes to actually finding these articles, you would want to use the GHC Library website and then go to the databases. You might begin with ProQuest or Academic Search Premier. And then once you get into that database, you would click peer-reviewed and full text. You would check those boxes so that the results that you'll pull up will only be things that are actually peer-reviewed. You won't get like Time Magazine, and it'll filter your results a little bit more. And then if you check the full text box, you'll only get articles you can actually read in full. You won't just get like a little abstract or a little short description of the article. You'll get articles you can read in full and print out. Another thing you want to do probably is to vary your search terms as you're searching for these articles. If you try a certain combination of search terms and nothing comes up, you know, if you put in frost and apple picking or something, if you're trying to investigate research surrounding the poem After Apple Picking by Robert Frost, if nothing comes up, if you put that in, try, you know, Robert Frost After Apple Picking, or Robert Frost Apples, or Frost Apples. Just keep trying until you hit the jackpot, because you will eventually, if you're writing about or if you're researching a piece of literature that's even remotely widely read, you're going to find research on it. So finally, or almost finally, I should say, I believe this is our second to last slide. How should you use journal articles once you find them? The most important thing to remember is that you should formulate your thesis and your minor claims, which are the main ideas of your body paragraphs, your minor claims are, after doing your research. So if you try to formulate your thesis statement before you've done your research, you'll find that you'll have to change it anyway after you do your research. So it's good to have kind of a thesis in mind maybe, but keep it really open until you actually research your topic so that you don't have to just go back and change it anyway. After you formulate your thesis and your minor claims, remember, these should always be your own intellectual property. So these should not be taken from a source. Your sources should work in support of the ideas that you formulate after having done your research. But the bones of your research essay should still be your own intellectual property, meaning your own ideas. And by bones, I mean your thesis statement and minor claims. So you should avoid patchwork plagiarism. You should avoid just piecing together paragraph after paragraph after paragraph from your sources, because even if you cite this, while that might be technically acceptable, it's not really acceptable, because piecing together a bunch of pieces of research and just sort of not having you in there is really a form of plagiarism. You're taking ideas from other people and you're sort of stitching together an essay out of those ideas. Your essay should still be your own ideas, but after having read the research that you've read. So you should use your research, in other words, in support of your ideas at the paragraph level. And what does that look like? Well, let's see. So you should integrate your secondary sources. In our case, that's a journal article. Those are journal articles at the paragraph level. And what that means is for each of your body paragraphs, so not your introduction and not your conclusion, but all of the paragraphs in between, you can think of the structure of those paragraphs as consisting of a claim, context, evidence, analysis, and synthesis or transition. What that means is you begin with the point you want to make about your source or sources, and this should be a smaller piece of your thesis statement or a step towards supporting your thesis statement. So we'll call that a minor claim. It's sort of like the thesis statement of a paragraph. It's that paragraph's main idea, and that should be your own intellectual property. So that should be your own idea. After you state the claim that you want to begin the paragraph with, you should lead into a piece of evidence from a source. This can be primary, this could be secondary, it could be sort of like some combination of the two, a piece of primary source evidence followed by a piece of secondary source evidence. You should lead into this by sort of explaining how your claim relates to the text or texts that you're writing about. And this is what I mean by context for a claim. So you're explaining how your evidence relates to your claim. Then you actually introduce the evidence, and you should not let the evidence just sort of stand alone as a sentence. You should introduce it with a little phrase like, Bob Smith writes, and then you introduce the quote. Then cite it. After you do this, include MLA parenthetical citation. And then after you do that, you can analyze the evidence. So you're really showing how that piece of evidence supports the claim that you began the paragraph with. And after doing that, you can sort of tie all of your ideas together and then transition to the next paragraph if that's appropriate. So I believe those are all of our slides. And if you have any questions about any of this, please don't hesitate to send me an email or send me a message in Canvas or stop by my office hours. I'm on campus every day, Monday to Thursday, and I'm always in my office at 10 a.m. You're welcome to call or stop by.